The sun beat down like a giant's hammer on the dusty land. It was the year 1887, and the Wild West was a place of wide open spaces and tough people. One of those tough people was Elara. She lived alone on a small ranch, far from any town. Her home was a simple cabin made of rough wood, with a porch that faced the endless horizon. Elara wasn't loud or boastful, but her quiet strength was clear to anyone who watched her. Her hands were strong from working the land, planting a small garden, and caring for her 2 goats and a tired old horse named Dusty. Her face was tanned from the sun, and her eyes, the color of warm earth, held a deep knowing, like someone who had seen much and understood more. Most folks would look at Elara's land and see only dry, cracked dirt and thorny bushes. They'd think it was worthless, good for nothing but rattlesnakes and tumbleweeds. But to Elara, this land was everything. It wasn't just dirt and rocks, it was a patchwork of stories, a canvas painted with the memories of her family. Her grandparents had built the cabin, and her parents had raised her right here, teaching her to respect every whisper of the wind and every blade of grass. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the dry brush, felt like a familiar song. The old oak tree by the creek bed, even when dry, was a landmark of countless childhood games. The flat, wide rock near the well was where her mother used to tell her bedtime stories under the stars. The land might not have looked like much to strangers, but for Elara, it was a treasure chest of the past, full of love and lessons. It was her home, her history, and a part of who she was, down to her very bones. Elara knew every inch of her land, not just from looking at it, but from living on it for her whole life. She could tell you where the wild mint grew thickest by the winding, dry creek bed, even when it seemed there was no water. She knew the exact spot where the first wild poppies would bloom each spring, their bright orange petals a joyful splash against the dusty browns. For her, the land wasn't just a place, it was like an old friend, full of secrets and stories only she could hear. Every sunrise painted the sky over her ranch with colors only she stopped to truly see, fiery reds, soft oranges, and gentle purples. As the sun climbed higher, it would warm the smooth, flat stones that marked her family's small burial ground, a quiet spot where her grandparents and parents rested. This was not just where she lived, it was where her family had lived for generations. Their hands had cleared the first patch of soil, their sweat had watered the first seeds, and their laughter had echoed through the valley. Elara knew the names of the birds that nested in the old mesquite tree and the path the jackrabbits took at twilight. She could read the signs in the earth, telling her if rain was coming or if a coyote had passed by in the night. She knew the secret nooks where the sweetest berries grew and the sturdy rock formations that offered the best shade during the hottest part of the day. This deep connection was more than just knowing, it was a feeling that settled deep in her heart. This land was not just something she owned, it was a part of her, and she was a part of it. It had given her family everything they needed to survive and thrive. It had seen her through happy times and sad times. To Elara, losing this land would be like losing a piece of herself, a part of her very soul. She would protect it with all her strength, just as it had protected her family for so many years. Elara's peaceful life, tied so deeply to her beloved land, was soon to be shaken. Trouble arrived not like a sudden storm, but like a slow, creeping shadow. It came in the form of Silas, a big, rich rancher who owned nearly all the land around Elara's small plot. Silas had more cows than he could count and a hunger for more land that never seemed to stop. He was a man who saw only profit in everything, and in Elara's dry, quiet ranch, he saw only wasted space. One hot afternoon, Elara was mending a fence near the edge of her property when she heard the thud of hooves and the jingle of spurs. 3 men rode up, dust billowing behind them like a dirty cloud. At the front was Silas, a broad-shouldered man with a stern face and eyes that looked right through you, as if you were just another piece of dirt. His 2 ranch hands, rough-looking men with serious faces, rode just behind him. Well, if it isn't the widow Elara," Silas drawled, not even trying to be friendly. "Still clinging to this patch of nothing, I see." He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the dry grass and sparse bushes. "You know, this land would be much better off as part of my ranch." My cattle need more room to graze. Quote. Elara stood tall, her hands firm on her hammer. This patch of nothing is my home, Silas. It's been my family's home for generations. Silas chuckled, a harsh, dry sound. Generations of dust, more like. No good for farming, barely enough water for your few scrawny animals. It's empty land, Elara, and I need it. Think of it as progress. He gestured widely with a gloved hand. I'll make you an offer, a small one, just to be fair. Then you can pack up and move along. His words felt like stones hitting her chest. Empty dirt? This sacred ground, full of life and history, was empty to him. His desire for her land wasn't a request, it was a clear warning. Silas was not asking for her land, he was saying he was going to take it. Elara's heart pounded like a drum against her ribs, but her voice stayed steady. Silas, you and your men need to leave my land. Now. Her eyes, usually soft, now held a glint of steel. Silas just laughed, a harsh sound that grated on her ears. Leave? Why, Elara, I'm just getting started. This land is as good as mine. He turned to his men, a smirk on his face. Boys, you heard the lady. She wants us to leave. But I say we make ourselves at home. Quote. Before Elara could say another word, Silas's men spurred their horses forward. One of them, a big man with a bushy beard, rode straight towards the fence Elara had just been mending. With a cruel grin, he pulled out wire cutters and snapped the strands of barbed wire. The sharp clink echoed loudly in the quiet afternoon. Stop that, Elara cried, dropping her hammer and running towards them. But they paid her no mind. Another man rode towards her small goat pen, yelling and waving his hat. Her two goats, Daisy and Buttercup, bleated in fear, scattering and disappearing into the dry brush, their bells jingling nervously as they ran for safety. Dusty, her old horse, whinnied from his small corral, sensing the danger. Elara felt a hot wave of anger and fear wash over her. They were not just trespassing, they were destroying her property and scaring her animals. She stood in front of them, trying to block their path, but they simply rode around her, their horses kicking up dust that stung her eyes. Silas watched from a distance, his hands resting on his saddle horn, a smug look on his face. He wanted to break her spirit, to show her that she had no power against him. His men continued their work, cutting more fences, riding roughshod over her small garden patch, trampling the few struggling plants. They were marking their territory, making it clear that this land was no longer hers in their eyes. Elara watched, helpless, as her small world was being torn apart, piece by painful piece. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows as Silas and his men finally rode away, leaving behind a trail of broken fences and trampled hopes. Elara stood amidst the mess, her shoulders slumped, tears of anger and sadness stinging her eyes. Her small garden was ruined, her goats were still missing, and the quiet peace of her home was shattered. She felt small and helpless against Silas's cruel power. She walked slowly back to her cabin, the silence feeling heavier than usual. Inside, the familiar warmth of her home felt cold and empty. She sank onto an old wooden chair, burying her face in her hands. What could she do? How could one quiet woman fight against a rich, powerful man and his rough ranch hands? As she sat there, lost in despair, a whisper seemed to float into her mind, soft as the desert breeze. It was the voice of her grandmother, telling stories by the crackling fire on cool evenings. Her grandmother had always been full of old tales, stories about their family, about the land, and about things hidden long ago. Elara remembered one story especially. Her grandmother used to speak of a heart of the earth, buried deep beneath their ranch, a special secret that would protect their family when times were toughest. Elara had always loved those stories, thinking they were just pretty tales to make a little girl feel brave. She had imagined glittering jewels or a pot of gold, but never truly believed it was real. Now, sitting alone in her damaged home, with the memory of Silas's cruel laughter still ringing in her ears, the old tales didn't seem so childish. What if there was some truth to them? What if her grandmother, wise and knowing, had meant something more? The idea, faint at first, began to spark a tiny flicker of hope in Elara's heart. It was a desperate thought, born of her deep need to save her home, but it was a thought nonetheless. She had to try. She had to find out if there was really something special hidden beneath her land. The tiny spark of hope that had ignited in Elara's heart began to grow, pushing away the heavy cloud of sadness. Her grandmother's stories, once just sweet whispers from the past, now felt like a map, a hidden guide. If there was truly a heart of the earth buried on her land, then finding it was her only chance. She would not let Silas take her home without a fight, not while there was still a chance to uncover its ancient secret. With a new purpose burning bright, Elara stood up. She wiped the last tears from her eyes and squared her shoulders. The sun had set, painting the sky with deep purples and blues, but she couldn't wait until morning. The search had to begin now. She lit an oil lamp, its soft glow chasing away the shadows in her small cabin. She went to her old wooden chest, a place where her family kept important things. Inside, beneath faded quilts and old clothes, she found a small, worn leather-bound book. It was her grandmother's journal, filled with delicate handwriting and pressed wildflowers. Elara had looked through it before, but mostly at the pictures. Now, she hoped it held clues, hints about the special secret. As she carefully turned the brittle pages, her mind raced back to the tales her grandmother used to tell. The heart of the earth, her grandmother would say, rests where the oldest roots reach deepest, near the place where the ancestors sleep. Elara remembered the small, quiet burial ground where her family rested, marked by smooth, flat stones. It was a sacred spot, often overlooked by strangers, but to Elara, it was the very core of her family's history on this land. She knew exactly where she had to go first. Putting the journal carefully back, Elara grabbed a sturdy shovel and the flickering lamp. The night was dark, but she knew every bump and dip of her property. With a determined step, she walked out of her cabin, heading towards the oldest part of her ranch, towards the peaceful, moonlit clearing where her ancestors lay sleeping. She went to the quiet burial ground, hoping the old stories held more than just memories.